Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
All right, here we are at Hump Day, making it through the work week. Thank you for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, or wherever you podcast. Got this last night.
We want to bring you some breaking news right now, just into our newsroom from the 2024 campaign trail. Joe Biden has just officially crossed the delegate threshold for the Democratic nomination for president. The NBC News decision desk projecting just moments ago Biden winning the Democratic primary in Georgia. You can see it was not close at all. Current President Biden winning 95% of the vote there. Just 1% in, but that's still obviously a massive threshold there. Biden's portion of Georgia's 108 delegates, allowing him to hit that magic number you see on the right hand of your screen, 1,968 delegates, now making him the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party.
That is NBC News' Tom Yamas, or as I call him, Tom Yamas. Sorry. Hey, so let's dig a little bit deeper into Georgia's numbers, if you don't mind. I'm a little wonky about this sort of stuff, so bear with me. When you look at the GOP side of things, Donald Trump receiving 84.47% of Georgia's votes, that with no competition whatsoever on the ballot. Everybody has dropped out. 84.47%. I mean, that's a dominant result, but nobody else on the ballot was actually running. And yet Nikki Haley got 13.2% of the vote. Now, some of that may have been early voters who voted prior to her dropping out, but still 77,737 Georgians signaled support for someone other than Donald J. Trump on the Republican ticket. How many of those were crossover voters? Don't know. But I bet you it was more than
11,780 votes.
Yeah, I think he's right there. And when you talk on the left side of the margins about all the dissonance between those who are seeking to make protest votes, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of that shows up. You see Marianne Williamson, who's been on the show, getting 8,600 votes. Wow, does that mean all 80? No, I can't associate that with the show, obviously. Dean Phillips, 5,200 votes. Between the two of them, that is less than 14,000 votes, compared to Joe Biden's 274,390 votes. 95.2% of those who voted in the Democratic primary. And again, this is not a huge turnout for either side because the race was essentially sewn up on both sides before Georgia even had a chance to weigh in. And we could have a discussion about, to me, how crazy it is that a handful of states that don't even represent the socioeconomic and sociological bent of the country get to have such an outweighted influence on who decides who are nominees for the two parties. It's a given. It's a messed up situation. We go around the world trying to spread democracy, and we can't quite do it here very well either in many cases, but that's another rant for another day. Yeah, turnout poor. 587,000 GOP voters, 288,000 for the Democratic presidential primary. And again, we have down ballot races that we'll be dealing with primaries for in May. Why we have to do that differently, I don't know. It certainly would help turnout, but nonetheless, that's all but decided on both sides now, as both former President Donald Trump and current President Joe Biden have sewn up their party's nominations with the number of delegates needed as of yesterday. Now, let me say this. There was a progressive movement for Georgia voters if they wished to do a protest vote. Let me read this from a couple days ago in the Politically Georgia podcast blog. Some liberal stalwarts want to use Tuesday's Georgia presidential primary to send President Joe Biden a message about his policies toward Israel, the war in Gaza. Georgia doesn't have an uncommitted option on its Democratic primary ballot like Michigan, where roughly 1 in 8 Democrats use the method to lodge a protest vote over Biden's foreign policy. He has been working to negotiate a ceasefire and has been critical of Israel's handling of the conflict while still supporting the longtime ally. But the law does allow Georgians to cast blank ballots. That's what happened during the 2022 U.S. Senate runoff when some Republicans made their disgust with GOP nominee Herschel Walker known by showing up to the voting booth but not casting a vote for either Walker or Democratic U.S. Senator Raphael Warnock. Friend of the show, State Representative Ruah Roman, Georgia's first Palestinian-American legislator, said the idea is spreading like wildfire in progressive circles ahead of next week's primary. Flyers circulating among liberal and Muslim activists in Georgia that read, "Tell Biden ceasefire now, leave it blank on March 12th. Some encourage non-voters to post a hashtag leave it blank on social media. Here's the thing. I'm looking at the math, and the math ain't mathin'. When I say that, I add up, or I take the total number of votes that the Georgia Secretary of State's office currently has posted. I subtract Joe Biden's numbers. I subtract Marianne Williamson's numbers. It leaves me with the exact number for Dean Phillips' votes. So, and here's how I know that the Secretary of State's office isn't yet giving us the number of blank ballots. There should be at least one. I know that for a fact. I literally walked across the street yesterday, signed in, checked in, got my ballot, decided I wanted to leave it blank. So, listen, that's only 96.2% of the votes tabulated and accounted for so far. Maybe my vote is, or my non-vote, is in that 3.8%, maybe, could be. But I have to believe I wasn't the only one who did that. And by the way, I've had a healthy discussion with friends, folks in political circles about that. My very dear friend Sonia, love her to pieces, known her since high school. We worked together in the newspaper business, part-time in high school after classes. We had a healthy discussion about that. She thought I was throwing away my vote, at which point I said, it's a primary. President Biden is going to win the nomination. Why not now, with my one opportunity to be a blip on the radar, to make a little statement? Why not do that now? And I also happen to be of the mind, see, this is where I can be a complicated individual. And Democrats in general, because we are a mosaic coalition of divergent priorities, we can be a difficult electorate to get a hold of. I actually also understand some of the circumstances that tie the president's hands when it comes to dealing with the Palestinian and Israeli Hamas crisis. He can't tell Netanyahu stop and do so with any force, or what? Are we going to involve U.S. troops in that? No. But we have seen several opportunities within the United Nations for the United States to be a bit more forceful, and each time, because we are Israel's closest ally, each time when given the opportunity, we use our veto power on the UN Security Council to stop any sort of statement or action at the United Nations level to denounce Israel's actions. So I'm just guessing here. I would presume at some point in time the Secretary of State's office may have revised numbers. I still, let me put it to you this way. When you put the two together here, I do not see a circumstance where President Biden's 95% is going to wind up looking more like Donald Trump's 84%. I guess what I'm trying to say is there seems to be a bit more discord within the GOP, and the eventuality of Donald Trump being its nominee than there is within the Democratic Party and President Biden being the incumbent nominee for that party. Which brings me to this, which I saw yesterday on Morning Joe.
Bringing to the conversation, Executive Director of the Republican Accountability Project, Sarah Longwell. The group is out with a new $50 million campaign to showcase Republican voters against Trump. Take a look.
Trump talking about retribution.
Retribution and going after people is disrespect of our military.
The military people that he's disgraced.
91
criminal felonies.
4 different indictments. He mishandled classified documents.
Taking documents.
Now his desire to do away with NATO.
Donald Trump talks about abandoning Ukraine.
He said he'll be a dictator on day one.
If he's going to be a dictator on day one, he's going to be a dictator, period.
That kind of stuff scares me.
Absolutely scares me.
The second Trump term would be worse than the first.
A second term for Trump
would be far more extreme.
It is dangerous, outright dangerous.
I cannot support Donald Trump again.
I would never vote for him again.
He'll never get my vote, ever, ever.
Again, those are all Republican voters. Sarah, good morning. It's great to have you on. So what is your sense, because you've been doing these focus groups for so long now, getting the pulse of voters, what is your sense of how big that pool of Republican voters is, who's open, maybe not to voting for Joe Biden, maybe, but just not showing up for Donald Trump at this point in 2024 in a way that maybe they did in 2016 and even 2020?
Yeah, there's one number that keeps coming up over and over again when you think about what percentage of the Republican Party hasn't gone sort of full MAGA, and that's 30%. If you ask how many voters believe that the election was stolen, you get about 70% of the Republican Party and about 30% don't. When you ask Republicans, if Donald Trump is convicted of a felony, will you vote for him? About 30% say no. Nikki Haley was polling about 30%, 28, 27% of self-ID'd Republicans in places like South Carolina, in Michigan, in New Hampshire. And so I think that is our persuadable group of people. Now, some of those people are going to go home to Trump. There's no doubt about it. They're sort of always Republicans. But there is another group in that 30% that I think has already been voting for Joe Biden. I mean, we've now run this campaign, Republican Voters Against Trump, in 2020. We ran it in specific places in 2022, like Republican Voters Against Kari Lake. And so this group has sort of been there for a while. But then there's this other group. And I would categorize them as kind of double doubters or double haters or a pox on both their housers. They tend to not like, because they're right-leaning independents, they're soft GOP voters, they're not Democrats. And so they have a tough time voting for Democrats. But also, they don't think Donald Trump is a Republican, not like the kind of Republicans of Reagan or of John McCain or of Mitt Romney that they like. And so they've got a hard choice. And I think strategically, we think about this less like building a pro-Joe Biden coalition, because a lot of these people, they don't love Joe Biden. But what you can do is build an anti-Trump coalition and get these people to either say, look, I cannot vote for this guy. I will not be part of him taking over the Republican Party and running out everybody normal. And even if they can't quite, we want as many of them as possible to get there on Joe Biden. We want to help build that case. But most importantly, we want to make sure that there is a permission structure being created with real Republican messengers. And all of these people aren't just Republicans. They are Trump voters. They have voted for Trump at least once, and they are saying they will never do it again and explaining why. And these real people tend to be the most persuasive and credible with other sort of persuadable voters.
So there was one potential voice in the state of Georgia that could have joined that coalition, and yet he whiffed on it. We'll share who that is and my disappointment, but not surprise, when the Ron Show returns. You can follow this show, by the way, on your preferred social media platform. That would be at Ron Show ETL, Facebook, the Twitter X platform, Instagram, Threads as well. And by the way, if you're listening on the America One Radio app or AmericaOneRadio.com, we do have the replay 5 to 6 p.m. We also have the on-demand tab at ProgressiveVoices.com, and you can listen to this show via podcast. Just like or subscribe or whatever it is that your podcast platform asks you to do to spotlight your preferred shows so that we are available for you whenever you want to listen each weekday when we give you episodes Monday through Friday. We do air first 9 to 10 a.m. on America One Radio or the America One Radio app. Greg Bluestein at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporting less than a day ago that Governor Brian Kemp had a curt message on the day of the Georgia primary about why he supports former President Donald Trump despite their long contentious history. I think he'd be better than Joe Biden. It's as simple as that. But the governor wouldn't say whether he voted for Trump when he cast an early ballot in the GOP primary on Friday, days after the former UN ambassador Nikki Haley quit the race. He told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution only that he's, quote, said for a long time now, I'd support the nominee. Well, Donald Trump is now the GOP nominee. He has the delegates. Governor Kemp declined to say Tuesday whether he'd campaign with Trump or take other steps to proactively support the former president, saying instead that he will focus on helping Republicans keep their solid majorities in the General Assembly. That's going to be my main goal between now and November, Kemp said outside of his Gold Dome office. My belief is that if we do well as Republicans and tell people what we're for and stay focused on the future, we'll have a great night up and down the ticket. The thing I think that disappoints me the most is if you had to give me a top 5 list of Republicans that are ideologically principled, as wrong as they can be about what they believe, they are at least principled in what they believe in and what they stand for. If you had to ask to give me a list of 5 Republicans in office currently, I could tell you 2 of them, and 2 of them would have been Governor Brian Kemp, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. And of course, those are 2 Republicans who have faced as much heat from Donald Trump, his mouth, his movement, as any, and they survived. In fact, they thrived. They showed the party a way through this Trump malaise. I mean, you're seeing the Trump movement literally disassemble the GOP now from within. And yet, Governor Kemp has no reason whatsoever to endorse Donald Trump, may fall short of doing so, the alligator arm, well, I'm going to support the nominee, without actually endorsing Donald Trump. And yet he has an opportunity to kind of be that flashlight that shows folks a path through this, and he's passing on it. Back to Sarah Longwell's conversation on MSNBC's Morning Joe yesterday.
Sarah, you just used one of those sort of buzzy political phrases, permission structure, that has really gained a lot of credence in recent cycles. Tell us a little bit more about what that means, the idea of where you're telling a voter, hey, it's okay to go against what you've always done before, vote this way instead.
Well, look, when we were trying to figure out how to beat Trump back in 2020, we were running some of these ads that you see going viral on Twitter where we were really beating up on Trump. And they were catchy and they'd get, millions of views. But they didn't persuade these sort of center-right soft GOP voters. I mean, voters, they were kind of turned off by all the attacks on Trump. And so we started experimenting with these testimonial-style videos of real people saying, hey, I'm Tommy from Texas, and I'm a Christian, and I cannot vote for Donald Trump as a Christian. And that really connected with people. That's what people found persuasive, because they wanted to be kind of on a tribe, right? They're used to being part of a Republican tribe. They don't feel part of a Democratic tribe. And so we had to kind of build them a new tribe where they felt like there was safety in numbers. They had a group they could attach to. And being a Republican voter against Trump allows you to maintain that Republican identity for a lot of these voters. That's really important to them, but still be against Trump and be with a group of people that feels the same way. And so that's the kind of permission structure you're creating.
When I was openly asking, was it last week, the week before, who is the future of the GOP? Who can be that person, the post-Trump Republican that leads the party back onto solid, principled, ideological footing? I got a text message in the midst of the show, someone who listens frequently, a conservative pundit. He texted me, Governor Brian Kemp, which makes a lot of sense because despite the Trump headwinds, while running for re-election in the state of Georgia, in a state that he narrowly won last time against the same candidate who you would think had a stronger game, a grassroots ground game to close that razor-thin gap that she barely lost by last time, you'd have thought that was going to be Brian Kemp's downfall. And instead, he was emboldened, and his voters showed up without flinching. Now, listen, I'm a partisan. There's no doubt about it. I would love to see the Republican Party come asunder. The problem is, right now, we're watching that kind of happen.
Campaign is pretty much taking over the Republican National Committee. At least 4 senior staffers were fired yesterday, according to 2 sources familiar with the matter. What's going on here? What can you tell us about this?
Yeah, at least 4 fired, potentially as many as 60 employees impacted. So the RNC met in Houston last week to install a new pair of leaders selected specifically by the former president, Chairman Michael Whatley, who previously led the North Carolina Republican Party. And, of course, there's been a lot of talk about this, former President Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, as co-chair. And Chris LaCivita, who's essentially a Trump co-campaign manager, stepped into the role of chief operating officer at the RNC. So this is a full-on remaking of the RNC in Trump's image. There's going to be, guys, very little daylight now between the Trump campaign and the Republican National Committee.
So we're watching, that's NBC News, by the way, we're watching as the GOP gets disassembled. But the problem is, while that's happening, and listen, I'm not here to save the GOP. No, don't stop. I'm not here to save the GOP. Unfortunately, it's the discombobulation and the dissolving of the GOP that's also causing so much calamity over American politics on a broad scale. We see what the MAGA movement is doing in Congress. And oh, by the way, there's gossip on that. They're going to be down to a 1-vote margin in the House, a heartbeat skip away from losing the majority in the House before the November election. In any event, we see what the Trump movement has done to stop tangible action on things like, immigration. I'm saying right now we need a functioning GOP, and we have anything but.
Call or text The Ron Show anytime at 404-919-2725. The Ron Show on America One Radio.
So looking at yesterday's Georgia presidential preference primary numbers, I'm following this guy, Eliam2 on the Twitter X platform, and he's sort of trying to piece together what the Leave It Blank vote came to be yesterday, and it's looking like Leave It Blank may have beat Dean Phillips with 2.2% of the vote. He's tabulating about 6,400 who may have shown up to do that. I guess we'll wait and see. I don't know why the Georgia Secretary of State's office is not somehow accounting for that, except for the fact that they don't seem to be equipped, or not equipped, but have a system set up for announcing ballots that don't have a candidate on them. I mean, this is a unique time in our American history, and never before has anyone, media or any movement, wanted to know how many folks showed up to vote and left a ballot blank. All right, let me turn the page, because there's a couple of projects here in Atlanta that are pretty contentious, despite the fact that I think that there is, if not a plurality, I'd say a consensus on issues that need to be addressed in the city of Atlanta, that I don't think there's a consensus on how to fix them. That's the problem. Atlanta, like most cities in this country, were literally ripped apart by the interstate highway system running roughshod through impoverished and usually majority black neighborhoods and communities of color. And ever since, cities like Atlanta have been looking for ways to address, well, no, I would say ever since, I'd say in the last 10, 20 years, cities like Atlanta have been looking for ways to fix the damage, to undo the damage done. And I'm not sure that that's actually possible, but one of the ideas is something they call the stitch. There is a movement to stitch up the city of Atlanta over the downtown connector. Let me give you the video here. Sizzle reel from the stitch.
Atlanta is at a crossroads. As we continue to grow, we're faced with healing some of the divides that have shaped our culture for decades. We've done it before with big undertakings like Centennial Olympic Park and the Atlanta Beltline. And we've proven that when the people of Atlanta come together towards a common goal, anything is possible. So what if we took all the best parts of what we've become and used that same determined spirit to forge a kind of connectedness this city has never seen before? That is the idea behind The Stitch, a new district designed to unite Atlanta at its core. Divided by the interstates 75 and 85 in the early 1950s, Midtown and Downtown have been separated for more than a half a century. It's time for us to bring them together again. The Stitch will cover the connector from the Civic Center MARTA station to Piedmont Avenue, creating an elevated urban fabric through the middle of the city. With restaurants, businesses, residences, and green spaces, The Stitch will be a destination in itself, positively influencing the surrounding communities with an estimated total impact of $3 billion. It will take an area with barren parking lots and underutilized buildings and transform it into an economic engine. And it'll happen at just the right time. Atlanta is finding new ways to move, from walkable neighborhoods to bike paths and more. The Stitch will help make the city even more connected and its streets friendlier to future generations, allowing easy transit to destinations throughout the city. Atlanta is on the cusp of something great, and it's up to us to build it. Let's do it together. Let's make it connected. And most importantly, let's make it a place for all.
I mean, nice video. I'll include it in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. So yesterday we learned in this reporting from David Wickert at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that a federal grant will pay for the first phase of construction of this long-sought park over downtown's connector in Atlanta. It's pretty exciting stuff. The Department of Transportation grant would provide $157.6 million for the construction of the Stitch. Now, listen, that is a drop in the bucket. This is going to cost billions to do. But it's hard to argue that this wouldn't actually improve quality of life for folks who live in downtown and midtown and Old Fourth Ward Atlanta. Anyway, the Stitch is a planned 14-acre green space over the connector. Think like Boston's Big Dig. And that, billions in cost overruns and years in the making, decades in the making. So here I am, a 50-year-old man thinking, will I see this before I pass? I'd like to hope so. I really would like to hope so. Anyway, 14-acre green space over downtown connector, one of several projects that seek to reconnect Atlanta's neighborhoods cut off by construction of interstate highways, as the sizzle reel mentioned. Another federal grant announced Tuesday would provide $50 million to connect the Atlanta Beltline Southside Trail to the Flint River Trail. The grants are the latest proceeds from the bipartisan infrastructure law Congress passed in 2021. The Stitch could cost an estimated $713 million. I'm giving you side eye here. You don't see that because this is audio, but I'm kind of looking at you like, really? I don't think it's only going to cost $713 million. I really don't. But $157 million goes a long way towards that, right? So if it is only going to cost $713 million, that's a pretty sizable down payment. First phase of construction expected to be completed. Oh, okay, I can live to see this. 2029. I can't. I should. I will live to see this in 2029. It would cover 3/4 of a mile. And listen, that doesn't sound like a lot, but in Atlanta, traffic mileage, 3/4 of a mile is like 10 minutes of travel on the connector. 3/4 of a mile of the connector between Ted Turner Drive and Piedmont Avenue. Atlanta plans to create a 14-acre park, affordable housing. Oh, that's where the affordable housing is going to go, over the interstate? I mean, I'm sure they're going to build it so that you don't hear the rumble of the interstate traffic beneath you, affordable housing tenant. But, 14-acre park, affordable housing, and other new developments over the highway. The idea is to reconnect neighborhoods decimated when the connector was built in the 1950s and 1960s. I love how David Wickert's just like saying the obvious without saying the obvious. They ripped through the Auburn community, the African-American Atlanta community in the mid-20th century. The project also seeks to support affordable housing and transit-oriented development. The first phase of construction would include 5 acres of new park space, improvements to 7 downtown streets, and improved access to MARTA's Civic Center station. Nikema Williams, my Congress lady, The Stitch will reclaim a massive part of our city from infrastructure that divided the black neighborhoods of Buttermilk Bottoms, Bedford Pines, and Sweet Auburn. There it is. Finally, somebody had to say it in this article. The Stitch has been a dream of the downtown Atlanta community for 20 years, according to A.J. Robinson, president of Central Atlanta Progress and the Downtown Improvement District. With the grant, quote, we are now able to make this dream a reality. Wickert pivots to the Beltline part now. The other grant would be used to build a multi-use trail connecting the Beltline to the Flint River Trail, improving access to schools, hospitals, job centers, and MARTA Rail. Ooh, it's the rail part that gets some of these on the Beltline folks ticked off. It would build two segments, a 1.6-mile trek in East Point and 1 mile in Clayton County. Ultimately, this 31.5-mile Flint River Trail will connect the Beltline to Lovejoy. Mayor Andre Dickens calling the grants monumental. These funds will catalyze the Stitch and the Atlanta Beltline to Flint River Trail, both long-term investments that will unite our communities and move Atlanta forward. Unclear when either of those projects will begin, but you heard me say, I read it, 2029 for the 3/4-mile Stitch project, or at least that phase of the Stitch project. Now we got to talk about the Beltline, because there's a lot of pushback for what is in the Beltline's DNA. All along, rail has been a key component for the Atlanta Beltline's planning. And yet we still have this bubbling under pushback for that element. Where was I yesterday? I was at a stoplight, and I was waiting on the light to change when the Atlanta streetcar just kind of ambled across the intersection, going diagonally. And it was a nice day, had the windows down. It was a really nice day yesterday, right? Had the windows down, enjoying some fresh air. That streetcar is as quiet as a house cat trying to attack vermin. I mean, just quiet. You don't hear a thing. It just meandered across, did its thing. I don't even think I heard it gives you the ding ding noise when it's approaching something. I may have heard that, but it didn't bother me in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I do not understand the pushback for those who don't want the rail component, which is, again, embedded from day one in the Beltline's DNA. But here we are. We have that pushback. Riley Bunch, Zachary Hansen at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporting that there is some fomenting, some heating up of this rail debate. They held a meeting at the Trolley Barn a couple of nights ago, and I had a conflicting schedule, couldn't go to it, but I would have loved to have sort of been a fly on the wall. Let me give you some of the reporting here. Riley and Zachary Hansen, Riley Bunch, Zachary Hansen. Upwards of 200 people gathered Monday evening at the historic Trolley Barn, one of the earliest electric car system trolley barns in this county. They held this at the Trolley Barn in Inman Park. This is a NIMBY liberal area, y'all. I love my Inman Park, but it's a NIMBY liberal area. Once home to one of the county's earliest electric streetcar systems, to weigh in on what they want modern-day mass transportation to look like along Atlanta's Beltline. The crowd was filled mainly with residents against the long-standing proposal from day one of installing a light rail line that would run along the popular 22-mile trail loop. We're free to agree or disagree with each other, according to Bill Bowling, the moderator and founder of the Atlanta Community Food Bank. I know that everybody here in the room doesn't agree with one point of view, and that's part of the reason we're here. But mixed in with the crowd were proponents of the plan, including city development heads, Beltline staff, and supportive community members who want to see MARTA extend its East Side streetcar. The $230 million project. See, that's why I don't believe the Stitch is only going to cost $713 million. You mean to tell me we're going to build a park over the downtown connector for about 2.5 times what it's going to cost to get just the streetcar to lengthen itself from downtown to Ponce City Market? Anyway, the $230 million project would lengthen the streetcar from downtown to Ponce City Market and is funded by more MARTA money, funds approved by Atlanta voters in 2016 to go toward transit expansion. Supporters see rail transit along the city's iconic trail as a way to alleviate pressure from the underused and unpopular MARTA public transportation system. I don't like that characterization, Riley and Zachary. Who says MARTA is unpopular with who? I think the streetcar lacks popularity because it doesn't go anywhere. It's pretty useless. Although I've used it. I've used it to get to downtown to connect with MARTA, to get to the airport. I've used it to get to an Atlanta United match and back because it drops me off 2 blocks from Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I can use it to go to a Hawks game. I can use it to go to a Falcons game. I can use it to go to a concert, a tractor pull, whatever, at either of those 2 venues from where I live. It's a 2-block walk to the streetcar, and it's a 2-block walk from the streetcar to those venues. The problem is I'm one of the few people in Atlanta that live anywhere near where the streetcar stops and starts and takes you to those venues. So that has to be addressed, and that's what the expansion is going to do. Supporters see rail transit along the city's iconic trail as a way to alleviate pressure from the underused and unpopular, and as a way to connect dozens of Atlanta neighborhoods. Right now, it doesn't connect dozens of Atlanta neighborhoods. Dozens of Atlanta neighborhoods and reduce economic development disparities between them. But since the Beltline's inception, residents have grown to love the easily traversed corridor that, in its most bustling stretches, is often shoulder to shoulder with foot traffic. That is true. But I also think that the streetcar would alleviate that. Community members against the idea of light rail share concerns over the system's noise, please, and speed, cost to ride, and ridership levels. They need to ride the streetcar. They need to see the streetcar. They need to watch as it goes by and listen to it. In a Monday editorial board meeting with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Beltline leadership said the project's design is only 30% done, so there's ample time to engage with impacted communities. Since the More MARTA sales tax was passed about 8 years ago, there's just been a gulf of new information, perhaps misinformation out there about what the Beltline transit is to be. That, according to the Beltline CEO, Clyde Higgins. I just think the general public needs the information. He continues, in this calendar year for sure, you will see efforts from Beltline, from MARTA, from the city, just to do some level setting so that people are all working from the same set of facts. Oh, but would that be ideal on so many levels, right? I'll share this article as well in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. Shirley Franklin, one of the early folks pitching the Beltline project some 20 years ago by then City Council President Kathy Woolard. Shirley Franklin said at the time that she didn't want another massive infrastructure project with all the work she was pouring into the city's water and sewer system. Fast forward 2 decades to last weekend, the former mayor said she shared tea on the trail with a 4th grade student who asked to interview her for Women's History Month. We wouldn't be in this room unless we were trying to protect something, former Mayor Franklin said. People will try to protect what they believe is good or advance something that they believe is good. Transit connected to the Beltline has been part of its plan since it was first proposed by Georgia Tech student Ryan Gravel. By the way, another invitation has been sent to him to come on the show in his master's thesis. But a recent community campaign against the idea questions whether any new transportation is needed. The group Better Atlanta Transit has begun posting regular anti-rail newsletters as well as enlisted Atlanta leaders. The former Atlanta Housing Authority president Renee Glover, who joined Mayor Franklin on stage at Monday's event to speak out against the current plans. Ladies, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? Again, I'll share this article in today's show notes at ronshowatl.com. You can be bemused along with me here. And we will continue to have this discussion. Again, I've sent invites out to Ryan Gravel. I'd love to have his thoughts on this at some point in time here on The Ron Show. Back after this. All right, we're in the home stretch, and I kind of want to continue on this Beltline conversation because I think it's important to point out sometimes, and this is where I think punditry gets it wrong. More on the right than on the left, if you had to ask me, but I'm willing to concede that on the left that pundits don't always confess to when there are poxes in their own houses. And we're seeing here with this Beltline pushback, again, Mayor Shirley Franklin is no conservative. She's not a moderate. She is very much a liberal former politician. And yet even liberals can get a little bit of, I think, a selfishness and not in my backyard NIMBYism attitude. I say the word NIMBY all the time. That's what I mean, not in my backyard. Because that even happens amongst those on the left who either have survived the demise of Atlanta from the mid-20th century and the resurgence and the revitalization and even the gentrification, and those who have decided to tough it out and gentrify early, and deal with the crime and the poverty and the redevelopment, the aches and pains that come with that. But NIMBYism exists even on the left, and seeking the greater good for all, sometimes at any inconvenience that is even concocted in one's mind, even on the left, you see evidence of this. We were talking about the Beltline meeting from Monday night. Former Atlanta Housing Authority President Renee Glover, who joined the former mayor Shirley Franklin to speak against Beltline rail expansion. Glover and Matt Bromfin, who is CEO of Jamestown, that's the company that owns Ponce City Market, penned a recent op-ed in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution against the Beltline rail plan. Why would Ponce City Market not want teeming hordes of people literally being delivered en masse to its doorstep? Why would Ponce City Market be against that? It would cost them nothing. Why would they be against that? When you go to Ponce City Market, you have to pay to park, right? Could that be why? Other prominent development community members, such as Portman CEO Ambrish Baiswala, has made their skepticism more known in recent months. Again, referring to the AJC's article, Riley Bunch, Zach Hansen reporting. The Beltline is just going to get dominated by that rail. And I just feel like that's a mistake. That's what Ambrish Baiswala told the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in December. It's like someone saying, let's pick a really good coastline, and then let's put a highway right where the beach is. That's what it feels like to me. I've lived in a beach community for 11 years, and I can tell you that congestion is a real concern getting to the beach. And I can also tell you, having lived, and this is Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, that one thing that would really benefit the Ocean Boulevard corridor in Myrtle Beach and connecting up to North Myrtle Beach and even making its way down to Surfside would be a rail system, a streetcar, a trolley, something, anything to get hotel patrons to and from local eateries and bars and night spots and other tourist destinations. Yeah, a streetcar would be nice, wouldn't it? We vacation all the time to go to places where we don't need to take our car. We go to all-inclusive resorts. We go to theme parks with their main streets so we can walk and amble and hop on a monorail or a trolley car to get around because it's easier on our legs, and we don't have to go back to the parking lot we parked in to go to another parking lot to park in, to go to another ride. We vacation to nations in Europe where we love the romantic idea of not having to have a car. We'll take a gondola or a pedicab or a subway or an air gondola, a sky bucket. We vacation because that's an ideal, and yet we have the opportunity to give ourselves that convenience here in Atlanta, and we're like, oh, that's gonna not look pretty enough, or it's going to occasionally come through and inconvenience my view of what? Green space, some architecture, some sculpture on the other side. I simply don't understand this pushback. And again, this is in the city of Atlanta. These are not Buckhead City Movement Republican conservatives. Despite a crowded room Monday, supporters said the question from the audience gave them optimism that transit along the Beltline will eventually be a reality. Back to Zachary Hansen, Riley Bunch's reporting. I'd love to see that questioning turned into advocacy for getting the project that we want. According to Matthew Rao, co-chair of Beltline Rail Now, we won't get to other parts of the city unless we start somewhere, and this is the place we can start. Both rail proponents and opponents are keenly aware of the most important ally up for grabs in the fight. Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens. It is the mayor who has been a loud supporter of the project, who needs to remain behind the project if what we want to do is to extend opportunity, upward mobility, and all the things in life that the East Side Trail has to offer to all of Atlanta, according to Rao. Sorry, making a note. I'm going to reach out to Rao and get them on the show as well. And by the way, Mayor Dickens' support seems to be waffling a little bit. He told an AJC editorial board in February, I've always been supportive of some transit on the Beltline, but I'm also sober and aware enough to know that our 20-year vision from when Ryan Gravel and company came up with it, now 20 years later, we've just got to look at how real is it. Come on, Mayor. It's going to do it for The Ron Show. Show notes, we've got them for you at ronshowatl.com. Replay 5 to 6 p.m. on America One Radio and wherever you podcast. And back at America One tomorrow, 9 a.m.